Welcome, everybody. It is 11 o'clock, and we've got a lot to cover over the next hour. Thank you for joining us today. This session is going to go over a variety of different keyboard navigation checks that we need to do within our websites. So we are going to go ahead and get started as folks keep joining us. As a reminder, please, if you have any questions during this session, please post them in the chat box there, and we will try to get every question answered, time allowing. But we are recording this meeting, and so we'll share the recording up on our YouTube page later today. We'll also try to capture a Q&A and all the other resources shared during this meeting and have those available for everyone. And the last housekeeping item, please keep yourself on mute as when you're not speaking, because we'll have a lot of people on this call, so thank you. With that, if it will advance a slide, hopefully my audio doesn't cut out. If it does, please let me know. I have already posted some resources that we're going to be using within the chat. The link to this presentation is pinned in the chat space, as well as each of the different accessibility checks and a hyperlink to the knowledge base article for those checks. So take a look at the chat when you have time and make sure to copy and paste those out. With that, what we're going to do, this is the first one of our kind of deeper dive training sessions that we're calling Focus on Accessibility. These sessions are going to go into a little bit more depth, typically cover multiple checks at a time, and they're going to focus again on some of those topics that are applicable for most state agencies, but may be unfamiliar to folks that are in that content editor, content author position, but are definitely all checks that can be reviewed and performed and most of the time fixed, although not all of the time fixed. So as we go through this, we're going to talk about what the accessibility checks are, who's impacted by them, and most importantly, how to review and fix all of them. As my final PSA, we have a variety of trainings posted on our YouTube page under playlists, both a mini training sessions as well as a broader accessibility playlist. So definitely check those out for more topics. So highest level possible. What is our goal with the checks that we're going to cover today? The main thing here is everything you can do and interact with on your website can be done with a keyboard. That's what we're trying to achieve. We don't want to have somebody be required to use a mouse just to get through and navigate through a website. So what we're going to do is make sure that any interaction that occurs with our website has some type of keyboard equivalent action that we can do. And so why is that important is because not everybody uses a mouse. There's lots of different people for lots of different reasons that will prefer a keyboard or are required to use a keyboard in order to navigate and interact with your website. So we want to make sure that any of those users are able to accomplish everything on their website that you're wanting them to accomplish. So that's the high level summary. Before we dive into this, though, I want to cover a couple of key terms because sometimes these terms may come across as more IT focused, and I realize not everybody here comes from an IT background. In fact, most folks that are involved in these efforts don't. So some of the terms we're going to cover today. The first is focus. When I say focus, what we mean is that the element on the screen, whether it's a hyperlink or a button, is actively receiving input from the keyboard. That's where it's usually going to be highlighted when you're using the keyboard to tab and space between things. But the focus is what tells the user this is where you're at on that particular page. And if you push the enter button, you're going to be selecting that particular element. The next term that we're going to cover, if it will let me, is keyboard traps. A trap is something where when the keyboard goes inside an interactive element, it isn't able to get out of that element so that the user can keep navigating the page. The most common place we see keyboard traps are usually two things: either embedded content like a map or a video or audio player, or on a pop-up. I'm sure everybody's visited a website. When you first log on to the homepage of the website, there's a pop-up that jumps up there asking you to submit your email. If that pop-up doesn't have a keyboard accessible close button, that user can't get past the pop-up and will never be able to access the rest of your site. So when we talk about a keyboard trap, we're talking about trapping the user in part of the web page that they can't get away from. And the the term I keep using often, that I need to find a better way of saying this, but interactive elements. That simply means it's a component of your website or a part of your website that the site visitor is expected to interact with. Most often that means clicking on a hyperlink to navigate to another page, but it could be a form element, various chatbots, multimedia players, anything that you want your site visitor to do or take advantage of. And all of the checks we're looking at today really focus in on that concept of interactive elements. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at on your website to make sure that a keyboard user can engage with that content and use that functionality. The other term we're going to talk about is hidden content or scrollable content. So hidden content is simply content that's on your website and is not normally visible to a sighted user without them first expanding out something or clicking a slider, something like that. With this content, there's certain things we have to look for to make sure that it's accessible. One way we often see this on websites is an FAQ section where there's an accordion and the question is in bold and the answer has been collapsed down under the question. That is all hidden from sighted users, and so we need to be able to make sure that if they're using a keyboard, they can select that FAQ so that it expands out and shows the content. And we'll talk about a couple of other examples like this as we go through. So the different elements, accessibility checks we're going to cover today. As you can see, there's a lot that are keyboard focused. I do want to make a note of caution about these. The web governance tool has been changing some of the wording over the last month and a half. One in particular, the iframe with interactive elements is not keyboard navigable. It used to be called iframe with interactive elements is not excluded from tab order. There's a couple of things like that that continue to change. So that's why we're really more going to focus on the concepts right now to help it make it easy for you to review all of these different items. Again, I've posted the links to the knowledge base article in the chat space there and append it, so everybody should be able to look at those later to go further into depth. We're also going to cover a bonus check today that this isn't really about keyboard navigation, although it's one that's very quick and easy to review. It's about, is there a mechanism to bypass blocks of repeated content? So each of these checks we're going to be covering today, there's a mix of different checks that may show up, and not all of these may be showing on your website. Most of these are simply review items. Those are the ones that have the little eyeball icon next to them. Just because you have these within your web governance dashboard for your site doesn't mean you have a problem. It means they have to be reviewed to confirm everything works correctly. The warning bell icon there in purple, that's actually a level 2A check. That is a warning item. Most of the time, again, it does require a review to see if it works or not. But most of the time, if you see that check, it's because it's actually a problem that needs to be fixed, and we'll cover how to fix that. And then, of course, there is one of the items there that if it appears, it means it's a bug and that most likely there is a fix. That's the little ladybug icon for scrollable content. So we'll cover each of those things as we go through this. One of the things that we get asked a lot, particularly on checks like these, because the vast majority of these checks are going to automatically show up on every page on your website. And that's just because these are review checks. And so every page has to be reviewed. So here's how you can identify if you need to do these checks. The answer is yes. Every page on your site, you need to go through and make sure that you can do everything and interact with everything on that page with proper keyboard control. There's not going to be a single page on your website that doesn't have at least one interactive element. A link back to the home page, for example. That doesn't mean there's problems. It just means we've got to use our judgment as we go through all this to do these reviews. And we're going to be looking at all sorts of things like the forms, the different content, etc. And so that's why I can't just go to a typical page on a website, make sure that that page is all good, and then mark my entire site as perfect. Every page can be unique, and thus every page has to be reviewed. So I know this is time consuming, but I'm going to show you a way to make it a little bit easier. While you're doing these checks, this is a good chance to also review the content on that page and see, okay, is this content still relevant? Does this page still need to be published? The easiest way to clean up a lot of review items and accessibility potential issues for a page, if it's not really needed anymore, is to unpublish that page. So take the advantage of this opportunity while you're doing the keyboard checks to also just audit your content and see what's needed, what's not needed. The good thing is you don't have to do each one of these separately. You can load a page, do all of the checks all at the same time, and then mark them all at the same time as done. So before we dive into how to do these checks, I want to talk about why we're doing the checks, the different types of people that require a keyboard or prefer a keyboard. Because I think that really helps us when we're trying to do these review checks, is to think about the people that are using our site to make sure we're properly serving them. So probably the most obvious one is folks with mobility impairments. They may have a difficulty controlling a mouse with fine motor skills and fine input, and so using a keyboard makes it a lot easier to navigate through. If folks have to use some type of alternative input device, like a speech-to-text device, to tell their computer how to move their mouse or how to move around a web page, they're not using either a keyboard or a mouse, they're using a microphone. And so ensuring that our websites can be interacted with for those users is important. A couple of these checks in particular are helpful for folks that are blind or have vision impairments. Most screen reader software relies on keyboard commands to be able to interact with the site. So if your site is accessible to a keyboard, it's going to help folks that navigate sites with screen readers. And of course, then there's the issue of sometimes it's difficult for us to maintain our concentration when looking at a big page, particularly a page that's going to have a wall of text or heavy content. So folks like me that have a hard time maintaining focus and paying attention for a long period of time, being able to use the keyboard helps keep me focused on where I'm supposed to be working. Cognitive impairments, if you're having difficulty maintaining the context of a web page or knowing how to navigate, using the keyboard helps to focus you through a logical order of how that content should be assumed. And then lastly, there's a ton of people that just don't use a mouse because a mouse can be viewed by them as slower. They do everything keyboard only because they can type 1,000 words a minute, and navigating by a keyboard can actually be faster. So ultimately, all of the checks we're covering today benefit a large segment of our audience base. So how to review these checks? The first thing is, and I'm really going to ask everybody to try this out while we're doing this. Open up one of your websites, open up your web governance tool, and kind of get used to how can we do all of this using only a keyboard. The best way to do all of this is to go visit your website, unplug your mouse, and force yourself to navigate using only the keyboard. I've pasted some of the common commands. It is a little bit awkward the first time you do it if you're not used to doing it, but after a few minutes, you're able to kind of pick up, and your fingers learn very quickly what keys to push. You'll use the tab key to go forward, shift plus tab at the same time to go backwards. Normally it's a space or an enter key to select something. On a page or in list, you can use the up and down arrows, or if you need to go back a page, alt back arrow. The hyperlink here I'm going to share at the end of this session as well. This is to the University of Berkeley accessibility page on keyboard navigation. They have a great table with all the different keyboard navigation shortcuts you're going to need. It's going to be a little bit awkward the first time you start navigating your website entirely with a mouse, but I think you'll find after a few pages, you get used to it, it makes sense, and it'll speed up for you pretty quick. So a couple of tips that I have when we're doing these review checks. First is go one page at a time, do all the checks on that page all at the same time. For most things, when we're doing our reviews in web governance, we tend to go to the web governance dashboard page, pick one check, and then try to understand that check and fix it everywhere on the website. With these keyboard ones, it's kind of the opposite. We want to go to one page, do all of these 6 or 7 different checks at the same time, make sure it all works, and then mark all of those as having been reviewed or ignored. The browser extension is a great way to do this because these checks all appear within the browser extension. So you can simply go to your page, have the browser extension open on that right-hand side panel, perform all the reviews, and then mark all the reviews at the same time. So I kind of recommend if you don't have that browser extension installed yet, get that installed. And again, I'll share that link as we go through here today. So the next thing to cover here is what are we looking for? At this point, I want to throw out a quick disclaimer. I'm trying to make the content today as accessible to everybody in the state, knowing that not everybody is IT and some of the terms we're using may be a little more technical. So we're trying to get this as plain language as possible. One of the risks when we do that, though, of course, is that we potentially gloss over important details and miss some key concepts. So while we're going to cover everything, and hopefully we don't share any bad information here today, I do recommend folks, once you've got a solid handle on all of this, do a little bit deeper dive. Use some of the resources we're going to share to do a little bit further reading, particularly those knowledge base articles. Hopefully after today, those articles will all make a lot more sense to you. Just understand this. Anytime we simplify technical things, there's a potential that we're skipping over some details. So that there's basically 5 things that we're going to look for as we go through each site. One is logical order. Does it make sense as we go through the site? Is navigating with the keyboard following an order that makes sense for how the content should be consumed? Two, we're making sure that as the keyboard is used, as I tab through a particular page, that the focus moves with it as well, and it's not jumping all around. Three, we're going to look for traps anywhere that the user can get stuck and can't get out of. They would be forced to grab their mouse to move to something else on the page. We want to test all the functionality that may appear on a page, whether that's a link, a form field, a interactive multimedia device, things like that. We also want to look for hidden content, both content that the user should be able to access so that it becomes visible, and the exact opposite. If there is hidden content that a sighted user or a mouse user would not be able to access on the website, the keyboard shouldn't take that person to content that's not supposed to be there. That's kind of a proving a negative type of thing there, but thinking about the accessibility concepts, this is about making our websites universal to everyone. So we shouldn't have different experiences for different types of users. So these are the things we're going to look at as we go through each of these in a bit more detail. Another way to kind of frame this is to ask all of those in a question. Can we get to all the interactive elements on the page? Can we go both forward and backwards using our keyboard? Do we get stuck anywhere? Are we able to dismiss those pop-ups? Does the order make sense? We're not jumping around. And can we see where we're at on the page at all times? That's the focus one, that last one. So keep these questions handy as you are navigating through your websites using your keyboard. Diving in, logical order and what we mean by that. It's simply when you're looking at your web page and you're reading it from top to bottom, left to right, does the keyboard focus follow you through that same logical order? When you get to a numbered series of links, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, does the keyboard focus go through that same proper order, or is it jumping around to different parts of the page? Look for links. Are you able to skip down to the main content? Are you able to get to all the different regions on your page, your header, your footer, where all the different blocks on the sidebar? Or is there anything interactive in those areas that your keyboard is not able to access? And lastly, the same thing with forms. When you have forms, are they going through that top to bottom order? And you're doing address, then city, then state, then zip? Or is it bouncing back and forth? And even though visually it's displayed in the right order, the keyboard is following it in a different order. So those are kind of some of the things we look for when we check at logical order. Again, I think we've already covered anytime your focus jumps or there's inconsistencies with the flow. If you see any of these types of problems, that's when we need to mark something to get it fixed. If all of these types of things pass on your website, then we can mark the logical order check as reviewed. Focus, I'm fairly certain we kind of covered all of this. Usually what focus means, and I'll show you an example here. Let me do that right now. When I switch to a web page, and I'm just only going to use my keyboard here. Whoops, I got to reload the page to get it reset, right? When I get to a web page, I'm only using my keyboard. You'll see that across the top, right now, the focus is on the link that says Visit Open Books. That's what we mean by focus. In this case, the focus is highlighted with a black outline so that it draws my attention to where it is. And as I tab through the screen, it's following that logical order. And I can see that I'm now on the link for Save with Arizona RX. It's important that those focus elements, even on a form, I tabbed into the search field, so I can now type in the search field, or if I hit tab, I jump straight to the button that allows me to submit that search form. And when I'm done with that, I can jump. If I don't want to hit submit, I'll just jump right down to the next link, which in this case is the homepage icon on the site I'm at now. So that's what we mean by focus. Is usually it's going to be outlined in some way. It could be made bold. In the case of hyperlinks, it may be the color changes or an underline, but there's some type of clear, visible indication that where the person is when on a particular page. Every interactive element of your site, if it's a button, a field, a menu item, they have to show that visible focus state when the keyboard is on it. If it doesn't have that, that's an automatic fail, and that's something that needs to get fixed. Most of the time, that's probably going to be means submitting a ticket to your IT team, which is likely ASET for most of you, could be your own agency for some of you. But there are a couple of cases where it might not be actually your website that's a problem. It's content that you pasted in and need to get cleaned up. But we can work with you to help identify if you do find these problems. Next, we kind of covered keyboard traps in detail, so I'm not going to go through all of these again. The most important thing, I think, for keyboard traps is to look for a way that somebody can open and close a particular element, a pop-up or an overlay. If it's an FAQ, like one of those accordions, you should be able to hit enter on the question and expand out the answer, and then hit enter again to collapse down the answer. Pop-up messages are the biggest perpetrator in this. Make sure you have a close button on your pop-up messages. If it's not, take it off, because you're going to, it's better to not have the pop-up than it is to prevent a user from being able to access your site because that pop-up has a trap in it. Same thing with interactive elements. Oftentimes, content can be embedded in on a site that you copy and paste from YouTube or Google Maps or something like that. If those interactive elements grab a hold of your keyboard and don't let you leave, then you've kind of ruined the experience for these browsers or these site visitors. So it's better to not have that content than it is to have some type of keyboard trap that prevents the user from visiting any other page on your website. And of course, always check all the functions, all the underlying functions of what a user is trying to do. Don't just check, hey, can I access the form fields and hit the submit button? Fill out the form. If there's a date field, see if you can navigate both typing in a date as well as using your arrow keys to select the day, month, and year, or however that field is formatted. There's one exception to functionality that comes into play here. And that's if that underlying function requires the user to do certain pathways. And I know I'm using a technical term here, but what I mean by that is there's two kind of examples of this. I'm sure you've all seen a form where you're supposed to upload a field and you can drag and drop the file onto that form field, square usually, or area, and it will upload the file. That drag and drop upload feature, it doesn't have to be keyboard navigable if there is a nearby alternate keyboard accessible button that would allow a user to upload a file. So that's one thing that's common to look for on our agency platform sites. That's how all of our file uploads work for the few elements that have that drag and drop type of thing. Another example, which I don't know that we have any in the state. Oh, yes, we do, on electronic forms where you're trying to capture an electronic signature. If that functionality requires you to move a mouse to write your electronic signature, it doesn't have to have a keyboard functionality equivalent. Although in the case of our electronic signatures, a typed name can serve as the electronic signature. So that's one of those details where we're saying everything has to be accessible. There are certain exceptions to what content you don't have to have the functionality working through the keyboard. It's a very limited exception, though. Iframes and scrollable content. So I'll show you an example here of an iframe or embedded content. Now I'm using my mouse to demonstrate this right now, but in a moment I'll use I'll use the keyboard to show how this works. But this is what we mean by an iframe. This website is not hosting an entire map of the entire world within the website. This is all Google Maps. It's been embedded into this website. This type of content still has to be accessible. The good news is Google Maps is very accessible. But look at any content you have that's like this that is embedded into your website. And then if you have content that requires, and I didn't get an example of this yet, if you have content that requires somebody to scroll up or down or left to right, all of that does need to be accessible. So just something to look for when you are navigating through. If that content is not accessible with a keyboard, it's an automatic failure that has to be fixed. So I kind of went through the most common slider, for example, and actually I guess I could have shown that, is on most agencies still have big slideshow banners at the top of their web page. A forward and back button should be visible on those sliders that allows a keyboard user to be able to advance and go back on the text. So look for those kinds of things as we're going through. So with that, I have talked enough, and I want to jump through and start showing an example on some real sites and do a site walkthrough. So I would like if everybody can, go and visit your site and work on this at the same time. I promised that I would have an example. Let me reload the page here of that extra bonus check that everybody comes. So the best way to check the accessibility for keyboard stuff is you go, you visit, type in the domain name for the site you're going to check, let the page load, don't use your mouse. That's the hard part for us that are used to using the mouse, and hit that tab button one time once the page loads. On every site, if you look in the very top left, the focus is now on a hyperlink that says skip to main content. This is that bonus check I was talking about. Are repeated blocks of text on your website able to be skipped so that the visitor can jump straight to the content on your site? This is a question we get a lot. What we mean by repeated blocks of content. The header on your site, that's a bunch of content up there. The sliver, your main menu, the logo, that's a block of content that appears on every page of your site. So that's the repeated block of content. Can that be skipped? Same thing with your footers. Oftentimes there may be menu items over on the left that are always there. That link at the top, if you hit enter, it should jump you and the focus of your screen past all that repeated content down to where the main content on your site is. And that's what it did here. And oops, let me restart the page because my extension, the browser focused out here. So look for that. If that's on your website, you can mark that entire check as reviewed across your entire website. You might want to do some just spot checks throughout different things to make sure you don't have particular pages that were built differently. But for most websites on the agency platform, we all use the exact same code base. That link's going to be there. And that's the first link that shows up. I can then navigate through. And as you see, I'm kind of going fast. I'm jumping through the sliver real quick. I'm going through the menus. I do need to check to make sure that all of my menus I can navigate through them, but I can go down, see what the menu is, etc., and continue to navigate through all the sub items of the menu. Most of those are going to, let me hit Shift Tab. That was the other important thing. Don't just check that you're going forward, check that you can hit Shift Tab and go back. You'll notice once I got done with that menu item, my focus jumped down to the next interactive item on the page. Now, I'm going to use my mouse to scroll up and show you why it jumped so far down on this particular page. On the website I'm showing, there is no interactive content up here. This is just one giant text and image wall. It's not a true slider, so there's no going back and forth on different slides, etc. So it jumped down over all of that content right to the next interactive element that's in logical order, which is this Learn More button. And you'll see, so it highlighted that link. As I go through, I just hit Tab again. And you're probably saying, Justin, the Learn More button's not highlighted. I don't see anywhere on the screen that's highlighted. And that's because on this particular site, we have a problem that needs to be fixed. We have hyperlinks on each of these images at the top. If I click on Drupal user group here, it's going to take me over to the Drupal user group page. And that's actually where the focus jumped to. But because of some design choices here, even though the focus is on that Drupal user group image, there's nothing showing me that that's where the keyboard is. And same thing there. So let me go back to my focus is now on the Learn More on that very first one. There are a couple of other accessibility problems on this that we need to fix. Yes, and that's why I like using this site to show these where there are problems. But as I navigated from that first Learn More up to the image of Drupal user group, that image didn't get highlighted. So that's something I want to get taken care of before marking that check about is every element receive focus. So it happens actually to all three of the blocks up there. But then once I go through that, I jumped over to the sign up for newsletters. I'm now in a form. And again, I want to type in every one of those forms and make sure, can I fill in that form and submit it using only a keyboard? And in this case, I'm tabbing down to the next select option, and I use my space bar to select those. Again, there's another one where the focus, which right now is on the checkbox for user group, the focus disappeared. So that's another item that I want to get fixed on this site. And then can I advance to the submit button? Whoops. I actually did not intend to do that. Let me use my mouse and jump so I don't have to go through the whole page again. Can I get to the submit button? When I hit enter, does that submit that? And it does. It brings me to the confirmation page. And now I have a pop-up. So this gives me a chance to test, do I have a keyboard trap? Can I use only my keyboard to escape out, which it did, or select that X? So that made it so I could escape out of that and continue to navigate through the site. So we would go through an entire site looking for all those types of things. And I know, whoops, I just fell back to using my mouse. It can be a trap. So let me make sure I'm using my keyboard this time to scroll up and down. Can you navigate through everything and get to all of the content on your website? Even over there at, down in the footer, check all of the links, make sure every single one of those get highlighted as you're navigating with your keyboard. So that's how to check some of these. One example, let's switch back over to my Google Maps example. And to keep it moving, I'm going to, once again, use my mouse to jump right to a particular field. When I navigate from that apply button field here, and this is just a demo site for this, so that's why it looks kind of weird. But when I navigate off of the apply button, it's jumping next directly into the map, which is where it should go. And the first item, it's a little bit difficult to see on this, but the focus has jumped down to the bottom right corner of the map where it's highlighted the keyboard shortcuts menu item. I can hit enter on that and it opens up a list of all the different keyboard shortcuts that I can use to navigate through that particular element. And if you're really eagle-eyed, you can spot that the X is where the focus is right now. That's the only interactive element on this pop-up menu, is the ability to close it. So I can hit enter and close it right back down, hit tab, and continue to navigate through. There are a number of different elements of this Google Map embed that I have to tab through here. The main thing I want to check is, now that I've gotten my focus down on that bottom right again for report a map error, I should jump out of that embedded element and continue on down the page to be able to navigate as we go. And each one of these, the reason each of these are receiving focus right now is because all of these are hyperlinked. So if I click on that button, I want to check, did that bring me to the information that I was expecting? If I didn't want to get the address, if I was wanting to see something else, oops, sorry about that. I hit my screen instead of my back arrow. If that wasn't the intended functionality, then that would be something I need to fix. In this case, that is the intended functionality. So that's kind of covers how we go through a page, what we're looking for on every page. It is important to check every page on your site. For most websites, let me jump down here. Whoops, I'm up in my browser. Actually, I'm going to switch to a different window. And we're going to go to another page. There we are. Let me reload this page. Once we've done that, and I will scroll all the way to the bottom here, one thing I want to highlight at the bottom of this page, and on almost all websites, there is a sitemap link at the end of the footer menu there. That sitemap, for most websites, some sites have customized it so it doesn't show everything, but for most websites, that's going to show you every page on your website, and you can just go through, use that sitemap, start at the top, go through the bottom to verify every page. My recommendation for how to approach these reviews is to use the browser extension, which I have loaded over here on the right. If your website is already being scanned by the web governance tool, we're just going to click on the little ladybug icon, and all the information related to this page is already there. And the reason I chose the user role page is because I knew there were some accessibility items that we had not reviewed related to keyboards on this one. And I can go through here, and one page at a time, I'm going to look for all those different keyboard elements. Did we get trapped in any component? And in this case, we didn't, so I'm going to mark it as review. Doing it here through the error allows me, once I've gone through that entire page and performed all of these checks, I'm just looking for all of these. The mechanism to bypass blocks of content was there. And I can quickly go through, mark all 6 of those different checks as having passed, although not all of them appear on this page or in this section. So that's one tip about this, is don't just look at all the level AA checks, skip over and look at all the AA as well, because one of the keyboard checks on AA. The other thing I want to highlight is there's another check that I mentioned earlier. Sometimes these checks get renamed. This is another check that really is related to keyboard navigation. It's, are there alternatives for features that require device or user motion? That was the check that I mentioned about a file upload field. If you have a drag and drop feature, the drag and drop feature doesn't have to be used via the keyboard, but there does have to be some alternative method to still upload that file using a keyboard only. So this is an example of a check that's very closely related to it, but wasn't specific keyboard. So I didn't cover it in today's session, but that's what that check is referring to. So the 2 ways that I found that are very useful is, one, using the browser extension and just doing these reviews all on your website. The second way is, you of course can go through and do these once you've verified those pages using the web governance website. It's not quite as easy because you have to have both open at the same time. Normally we recommend starting with the checklist because it's broken down into level A and level AA. And in fact, I can just hit keyboard and a majority of those checks are going to show up, not all of them, because unfortunately they don't all contain the word keyboard. So you do have to look for each of the 7 checks, 6 checks. But I could go through here. If I have checked every page on my website, which is, if you're a smaller website, it's easy to do in one session. A larger website, obviously, is going to take more time. But if I perform these checks on every one of those pages, I can just quickly go in there and mark those checks. Now, this is my one warning here. The action item when I'm on the checklist page is to ignore this check. If I were to ignore this check for, is keyboard focused trapped in any component, it's going to ignore it, but it's not going to ignore it just on the 3 pages where it hasn't been reviewed yet. It will entirely ignore that check and not remind you again in the future. So I would recommend not using the ignore this check button here to just not get these, because in the future, you may add a pop-up message or an embedded element, an iframe video player, and you'll need to review those items. But if you ignore this check, you won't get notified to review them again. So the alternatives here are, okay, I've got the check. I can go into each page individually now and mark it. And you'll notice it said 3 on the previous screen, but now it's only finding 2. That's because when I was using the browser extension, I marked one of these for the user role page already. So that's one way to do it. The other way to use the web tool to mark these as reviewed is to go to the pages with failing checks button. This one is probably the easier way if you're going to use the web governance interface, because I can go one page at a time. And let me expand this down and jump down to the page that I was reviewing, which was my user roles page. I can open the page details button and I can find all the different checks that are related to keyboard navigation that I just did, and then mark them as fixed on this particular page. And you'll see that, is this keyboard focus visible at all times? On the user roles page, it was. On the home page, it wasn't. But there's a bunch of instances of that here. So here, because I did make sure all of that was good, I can click ignore all issues, and mark all of these as reviewed or ignored at the same time. Last reminder of this, remember there is a difference between ignore and mark as fixed. Mark as fixed tells the web governance tool that there is a change you made to the website and the tool should scan it again to see if it's still a problem. For all of these review and warning items, that is always going to keep coming back. So if it's been fixed or if it works, you want to mark it as ignored so that the web governance tool doesn't keep coming back to the same code. And this is the case where instead of going one by one on each of the links and interactive elements on that page, I'm going to use the ignore all issues button, because that's not ignoring the entire check. It's ignoring each one of these instances. And if I go and change this page and add another interactive element, that new element is going to show up here. So this is where we want to use the ignore all issues button. So those are a couple of different ways to go through and perform those reviews. Real quick, as we go through and as you're doing your reviews, make sure to use the tool to mark things as reviewed or ignored. If you do come across stuff like we did today that have problems, first, you can check the agency platform bug tracker. We now have a list where we're tracking all the different bugs that have been reported. You can see if somebody's already reported it, and we're working on it. If we're not already aware of it and working on it, submit a ticket. Please let us know about the problem that you're coming across and why it didn't work. When submitting a ticket for any technical things that you want us to fix, please include the site and specific page URL where the problem is occurring. Many agencies have multiple websites. We work with 200 different sites and a ton of different users, so it speeds the process up if you include the URL where the problem is. Let us know the check name. Give us the specific examples of where the problem is occurring, what part of the page it's on, a URL, etc. Tell what the behavior is that you're seeing versus what you're expected to see. This is going to help my team respond to these issues quicker, review them, confirm if it's a problem, and get all the information we need to pass on to our developers, who then need to go and create the solution. So anytime you have something that you can't fix because it's a technical issue with the website, please follow this step. I will say for most of this stuff, you're probably not going to come across that. Anytime you do have things that need to be fixed, it's likely content that's been pasted in from somewhere else. But definitely open up a ticket if you're not certain about it. There's a lot to learn about all of this stuff. I've tried to cover as much as I can as we've gone through, but there's a lot more resources to dive into. If today was you're now fascinated more by this, you want to learn more, here's a link to all the different additional resources you might find useful in this. In particular, I've included a hyperlink to the Acquia web governance extension. That hyperlink, that will, if you don't have it installed in Chrome browser, it is approved by Homeland Security. I would highly recommend installing that. And then the two other links there, the WebAIM initiative, they have a great section on keyboard accessibility. It's fairly good reading, so dive into that one. And the same thing with University of California at Berkeley. Their keyboard accessibility page is a fantastic resource to visit as well. And so hopefully that answers any questions anybody has. And thank you and shout out to Danielle for helping answer questions as we've gone through all of these. Yes, I will post the bug tracker link in the chat space as well. I forgot to do that as I was creating my links for this. But with that, If you're not already familiar with our YouTube page, we have a bunch of other trainings that we have done in the past on different topics. If you haven't gone through and listened to these yet, I highly encourage it. We're going to continue to put on more of these trainings. My final pitch to everyone, I know there are a lot of amazing people in the state. We only got 5 people on our team here. We're swamped keeping your sites up, running, secured, fixing technical issues. Putting on these trainings takes us about 5 hours of development work for every 1 hour of training. So for those of you, Thomas, Maria, Sarah, but Natalie, there's a bunch of people here that I know are really good at this stuff. If you're interested in helping us do trainings on some of these deeper dives on specific topics, please reach out to me. We want to make sure that all agencies are helping each other because we really are one state of Arizona, even though we're a bunch of different agencies. So with that, I want to thank everybody very much for attending today. We will post this later on today on our YouTube page, and hopefully in a few days get the questions and answers posted there as well.